Winter never imagined her last thought would be about children who weren't hers. But as 12 small bodies pressed against her in the freezing darkness of the abandoned ruins, their heartbeats syncing with hers, she understood something profound. Love didn't ask about bloodlines or pack allegiances. It simply chose who to save. Tell me, where are you watching this story from today? The ruins had once been a cathedral, Winter thought, though time and war had stripped it down to stone bones and broken arches. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the collapsed roof, painting silver stripes across the dirt floor where she huddled against the only wall still standing. 3 days. She'd been Shadowmaw Pack's prisoner for 3 days, though it felt like 3 lifetimes since they'd ripped her from Atlas's territory. Since rough hands had grabbed her during her evening walk, chloroform burning her throat before darkness swallowed everything. She'd woken in this godforsaken place with zip ties cutting into her wrists and the acrid smell of wolves she didn't know permeating every breath. The Shadowmaw wolves had been clear about their intentions. She was leverage, a bargaining chip to force Atlas to return the southern territories his forces had claimed 6 months ago. They'd left her here with a single bottle of water and threats about what would happen if their Alpha King didn't comply. Then they'd disappeared. Winter had spent the first day screaming for help until her voice gave out. The second day, she'd worked the zip ties against a sharp stone until her wrists bled and the plastic finally snapped. By the third day, she'd accepted a grim truth. Atlas might not find her in time. The Silverstone Kingdom was vast, and these ruins sat in the disputed borderlands where neither pack maintained regular patrols. She'd been preparing to make a run for it when she heard the whimpering. At first, Winter thought the wind was playing tricks through the broken stones. But the sound came again, thin and desperate, from deeper within the ruins. Every instinct screamed at her to run while she had the chance. Atlas had told her about the dangers of abandoned places in pack territories. Rogues, wild animals, worse things that hunted in the dark. The whimper turned into a cry, a child's cry. Winter's feet moved before her mind could overrule them. She found them huddled in what must have been the cathedral's crypt, accessible only through a half-collapsed stairwell that she had to squeeze through sideways. 12 pairs of eyes reflected the moonlight filtering from above. 12 small shapes pressed together for warmth in the corner of the underground chamber. Pups. Winter's breath caught. She'd only known about werewolves for 2 months, since the night Atlas had saved her from a rogue attack and changed everything she thought she understood about reality. She'd seen adult wolves, had felt the mate bond snap into place between her and the Alpha King, despite every logical reason it shouldn't. But she'd never seen pups before. They were beautiful. Their wolf forms were smaller than she'd imagined, ranging from the size of large cats to that of medium dogs. Their fur was dark, blacks and deep grays and rich browns that marked them as Shadowmaw. The oldest looked to be maybe 10 in human years, the youngest no more than 3 or 4. They stared at her with a mixture of terror and desperate hope that made her chest ache. "Hey," Winter whispered, crouching slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The largest pup, a dark gray male with intelligent amber eyes, growled low in his throat. He positioned himself in front of the others, small body vibrating with protective instinct despite the fear rolling off him in waves. Winter's heart cracked. He was trying so hard to be brave. "I know you're scared," she continued, keeping her voice soft and steady. "I'm scared too, but we're going to be okay. I promise." She didn't know if that was true, didn't know if they understood her words in their wolf forms. But something in her tone must have resonated, because the gray pup's growl faded to an uncertain whine. Winter noticed the shivering then, the way their small bodies trembled against each other. The temperature had been dropping steadily since sunset, and down here in the crypt, the cold bit deeper. These pups had no blankets, no heat source, nothing but each other. And from the way they looked at her with hollow eyes, they hadn't eaten in some time either. "Where are your parents?" Winter asked, though she feared she knew the answer. The gray pup let out a mournful sound that confirmed her suspicions. These were orphans, children of wolves who died in the territorial conflicts between Shadowmaw and Silverstone. Left behind and forgotten in the chaos of war, rage, bright and fierce, flooded through Winter's veins. What kind of pack abandoned their young? What kind of leader let children go cold and hungry while playing political games? She thought of Atlas, of his stern face and the weight he carried. She thought of the war he'd told her about, the battles for territory and resources that had raged for generations. She thought about how he'd explained pack law and hierarchy and the brutal necessities of survival in a world where strength was everything. And then she stopped thinking and acted. "Come here," Winter said, settling herself against the wall and opening her arms. "All of you. Come here." The pups hesitated. The gray one watched her with those two knowing eyes, weighing the risk. Then one of the smallest, a black pup with a white patch on its chest, broke away from the group. It limped toward Winter on 3 legs, the 4th held gingerly off the ground. Blood matted the fur around what looked like a deep gash. Winter's heart broke completely. "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed, gathering the injured pup carefully into her lap. It whined softly, nuzzling against her stomach with desperate trust. The small body radiated cold despite the fur. That broke the dam. One by one, the other pups crept forward. The gray one came last, still wary, but unable to resist the promise of warmth. Within minutes, Winter was buried under a pile of small, shivering bodies. They pressed against her from all sides, seeking heat and comfort and something that felt like safety. Winter wrapped her arms around as many as she could reach, tucking smaller pups inside her jacket. She'd never been so grateful for the thick wool coat Atlas had insisted she wear. She positioned her body to block the wind coming through cracks in the stone, creating a shelter with her presence. "I've got you," she murmured, running her hands over soft fur. "I've got you all." The hours crawled by. Winter sang every song she could remember, her voice hoarse but steady. Lullabies her mother had sung when she was small. Pop songs from the radio. Nonsense rhymes that made no sense but seemed to soothe the trembling bodies pressed against her. Between songs, she told them stories about summer days and warm sunshine, about families who loved each other, about happy endings. The injured pup needed attention. Using strips torn from the hem of her shirt, Winter fashioned a makeshift bandage for its leg. The pup whimpered, but held still, seeming to understand she was trying to help. She used the last of her water bottle to clean the wound as best she could, murmuring apologies when the pup flinched. Around midnight, the temperature plummeted. Winter's teeth chattered so hard she had to clench her jaw. Her fingers went numb where they stroked through fur, and her legs cramped from sitting in the same position for hours. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. The pups had finally stopped shivering, their breathing evening out into something like sleep. If she moved, they'd get cold again. If she moved, they might scatter back into the corners where hypothermia waited. If she moved, one of them might die. So Winter stayed. She drifted in and out of consciousness, jerking awake whenever she started to slump. The gray pup had positioned himself across her lap like a sentinel, his head resting on her knee, but his eyes half open, still watching. Still protecting his makeshift family, even as exhaustion pulled at him. "You're a good big brother," Winter whispered, scratching behind his ears. "They're lucky to have you." His tail thumped once against her leg, and something warm bloomed in her chest, despite the cold. Dawn was still hours away when Winter heard the first howl. It came from the north, long and haunting, carrying across the ruins like a promise or a threat. The pup stirred against her, whining softly. The gray one lifted his head, ears pricking forward. Winter's heart hammered. Was it Shadowmaw returning, or something worse? The howl came again, closer now, joined by others. Winter counted at least a dozen distinct voices in the chorus. She pressed the pups closer, every muscle tensing. If she had to run, she'd run. If she had to fight, she'd fight. These children had survived this long. She wouldn't let anyone hurt them now. Footsteps crunched through debris above, heavy, deliberate, belonging to someone who didn't fear what they might find. Winter's breath came in short gasps. The injured pup in her lap trembled, the movement sending pain through its small body. "Shh," Winter soothed, even as her own fear spiked. "Shh, it's okay." A figure appeared at the top of the crypt stairs, silhouetted against the pre-dawn light filtering through the ruins. Broad-shouldered and tall, moving with the fluid grace that marked him as predator, even in human form. For a heartbeat, Winter couldn't make out his features. Then he stepped down into the moonlight, and everything in her chest simultaneously collapsed and exploded. Atlas. He stopped dead on the third step, his silver eyes widening as they took in the scene. Winter, filthy and exhausted, her back against the stone wall. 12 dark-furred pups piled around her, on her, against her. The makeshift bandages, the blood on her shirt, the way she held them like she'd fight death itself to keep them safe. Winter. Her name came out like a prayer and a curse, rough with emotion she'd never heard from him before. "Atlas." Her voice cracked. "Don't. I'm not here to hurt them." He descended the rest of the stairs slowly, each movement careful and controlled. Other figures appeared above. His beta, she thought, and several warriors. They stared down at the scene with expressions ranging from shock to confusion, to something that might have been anger. "They're Shadow Maw," one of the warriors said, voice tight. "Alpha, those are enemy pups." Winter's arms tightened instinctively. The gray pup growled, small body going rigid with tension. Atlas's eyes flicked to the warrior, and something dangerous crossed his features. "They're children." His tone left no room for argument. "Stand down." He crouched in front of Winter, close enough that she could see the exhaustion lining his face. He'd been searching, she realized. For 3 days, he'd been tearing the territory apart, looking for her. "You're freezing," Atlas said softly, reaching out to touch her cheek. His hand was warm, so warm, and Winter nearly sobbed at the contact. "We need to get you warm, get you checked by a doctor." "Not without them." The words came out fierce despite her chattering teeth. "Atlas, I'm not leaving them. They're orphans, abandoned. The pack left them here to die." His jaw clenched. "Winter, no." She met his eyes, saw them flash gold as his wolf rose to the surface. "These are babies. Look at them. They didn't choose this war. They didn't ask to be born into it. I found them yesterday, scared and starving and so cold." Her voice broke. "I kept them alive all night. All night, Atlas. I'm not going to abandon them now so we can maintain some political stance." The gray pup shifted, pressing tighter against her side. The injured one whimpered in her lap. Around them, the other pups watched with frightened eyes, as if they understood their fate hung in the balance. Atlas stared at Winter like he'd never seen her before. His expression shifted through a dozen emotions too quick to name. Behind him, the warriors shifted uncomfortably. "Alpha," the beta ventured carefully. "If we take Shadowmaw pups, it could be seen as, I don't care." Atlas's voice cut like a blade. His eyes never left Winter's face. "She's right. They're children." He stood, turning to face his warriors. "We take all of them. Anyone has a problem with that, take it up with me directly." The authority in his tone made even Winter shiver. This was the Alpha King, the one who commanded the largest pack in the Northern Territories. The one other wolves feared and followed in equal measure. No one argued. Atlas turned back to Winter, something soft entering his expression. "Can you walk?" "I don't know." Honestly, she'd been sitting so long, she wasn't sure her legs still worked. "But the injured one needs help. Its leg..." I see it. Atlas crouched again, this time extending his hand slowly toward the gray pup. Easy, little warrior. I'm not going to hurt your family. The gray pup's lips pulled back in a tiny snarl. Atlas waited, patient, hand steady. After a long moment, the pup sniffed his fingers. Whatever he scented there must have satisfied him, because the growl faded. Brave, Atlas murmured, protecting them even now. He looked at Winter, like someone else I know. Heat that had nothing to do with the cold flooded her cheeks. Atlas's eyes darkened, something possessive and proud flickering through the silver. Marcus, he called without looking away from Winter. Get blankets, warm ones, and alert the medical wing we're bringing in injured pups. Yes, Alpha. The beta disappeared quickly. What followed was a careful orchestration. The warriors brought down thick blankets that Atlas wrapped around Winter and the pups. He lifted her himself, cradling her against his chest with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his powerful frame. The pups whined in distress as they were separated from her warmth. It's okay, Winter called down to them as Atlas carried her up the stairs. We're going somewhere warm. We're going together. The warriors gathered the pups with surprising tenderness. The gray one refused to be carried, limping up the stairs on his own with stubborn pride. The injured pup clung to the warrior holding it, shivering despite the blanket. Outside the ruins, the Silverstone pack had assembled. Dozens of wolves in various forms surrounded the perimeter. They'd been searching, Winter realized, all of them, for her. When they saw Atlas emerge with Winter in his arms, followed by warriors carrying Shadowmaw pups, confusion rippled through the group. Wolves shifted uneasily. Questioning growls rumbled. One female stepped forward, her expression hostile as she stared at the dark-furred pups. Alpha, why are we bringing enemy young into our territory? This is necessary. Atlas's voice rang out with absolute authority. These pups are under my protection, under Winter's protection, which means they're under Silverstone Kingdom's protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can challenge me now. Silence fell like a stone. No one moved. No one challenged. Winter's throat tightened. He was risking pack descent for children who weren't his, for orphans of the pack he'd been at war with, because she'd asked him to, because they were children who needed help. The journey back to Silverstone territory passed in a blur. Winter dozed against Atlas's chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat lulling her into half-sleep. She roused when they reached the pack house, a massive structure that still took her breath away with its size and grandeur. Atlas carried her straight to the medical wing. A doctor was already waiting, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Sarah, who clucked her tongue when she saw Winter's state. Hypothermia, dehydration, mild malnutrition, Dr. Sarah rattled off as she examined Winter. Your wrists are infected where the zip ties cut. You're going to need antibiotics and rest, lots of rest. The pups first, Winter insisted, trying to sit up despite the exhaustion weighing her down. The injured one is being treated right now, Dr. Sarah assured her. Dr. Chen is handling them. He's excellent with pups. Now lie back and let me help you. But Winter couldn't rest, not until she saw them. Atlas seemed to understand. He disappeared for a moment, returning to scoop her up again despite the doctor's protests. 5 minutes, he told Dr. Sarah. Then she's all yours. He carried Winter down the hall to a large room that had been converted into a makeshift nursery. All 12 pups were there, some in wolf form, others shifted back to human children now that they felt safer. They were being cleaned, examined, fed warm broth that they slurped down desperately. The injured pup, a little boy who looked about 5 in human form, was having his leg properly bandaged. He whimpered but held still bravely. When he saw Winter, his face lit up. Lady! He reached for her with the universal grabbing gesture of small children everywhere. Winter's chest ached. I'm here, sweetheart. You're being so brave. The gray pup stood near the window in human form. He was older than Winter had thought, maybe 9 or 10, with the same amber eyes and dark hair. He watched the proceedings with wariness, clearly the appointed guardian of this makeshift family. "They're safe?" he asked Winter, his voice rough with distrust, but desperate with hope. "They're safe," Winter promised. "All of you are safe now. Shadowmaw will come for us." The boy's jaw set stubbornly. "They'll want us back. Use us." Atlas crouched to the boy's eye level, still holding Winter. "Not while you're under my protection. You have my word." "The word of the Alpha King who killed my father." The boy's eyes flashed, anger and grief warring across his young face. The room went very still. Winter felt Atlas tense, saw pain flicker across his features before his expression shuddered. "Yes," Atlas said quietly. "That Alpha King. And I'm sorry for your loss. War is brutal, and it takes too much from too many. I can't change what happened, but I can make sure you and your siblings survive it." He paused. "What's your name, warrior?" The boy hesitated, clearly torn between pride and pragmatism. "Dante. Dante." Atlas nodded with respect. "A strong name. You've done well protecting them. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." Dante's eyes cut to Winter. "She saved us, even though we're nothing to her, even though she could have left." "That's who she is," Atlas said simply, and the pride in his voice made Winter's eyes burn with unshed tears. "She sees children who need help, and she helps, no matter the cost." His arms tightened around her. "Which is why she's my mate, why she'll be Luna of this pack, and why anyone who hurts you or your siblings will answer to both of us." The declaration sent whispers through the room. The medical staff exchanged glances. The warriors by the door straightened with recognition. This wasn't just about taking in orphaned pups. This was Atlas claiming Winter publicly, tying her protection of these children to pack law and the mate bond, making her choice his choice, her stand his stand. Winter looked up at him, seeing the determination in his features. "Atlas!" No arguments. His silver eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "You chose to save them. I choose to stand with you. That's what mates do." Warmth flooded through Winter's chest, the mate bond humming with approval. She'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping the pups alive, that she hadn't stopped to think about what would happen after, hadn't considered that Atlas might not agree with her decision, that the pack might reject children of their enemies. But here he was, shouldering the burden with her, claiming her choice as his own. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." A wry smile tugged at his mouth. "We have 12 new dependents and a pack that's going to have opinions. This is going to be complicated." "Everything with you is complicated," Winter managed a weak laugh. "True." His smile widened slightly. "But at least it's never boring." Dr. Sarah cleared her throat pointedly. "Alpha, I really must insist. Winter needs treatment and rest. You can continue this conversation after she's been properly cared for." Atlas nodded, pressing a kiss to Winter's forehead that made her breath catch. "I'll be right outside. I'm not going anywhere." As he carried her back to the examination room, Winter heard Dante's voice, small but fierce. "She really saved us. All night. She stayed." "She did," Atlas confirmed, "and now we'll return the favor." The next hours passed in a haze of medical care. Dr. Sarah cleaned and bandaged Winter's wrists, started an IV for fluids, and insisted she drink something that tasted like liquid chalk, but apparently would help with the hypothermia. Atlas returned as promised, settling into a chair beside her bed with the patience of stone. "You should rest," Winter told him, seeing the exhaustion etched into every line of his body. "You've been searching for 3 days. So have you been missing for 3 days? His hand found hers, fingers threading together carefully to avoid the bandages. "I'm not leaving you again. It wasn't your fault I was taken. Wasn't it?" Bitterness edged his tone. "You're my mate. That makes you a target. Shadowmaw knew exactly how to hurt me. Winter squeezed his hand, and I survived. We both survived. Because you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Including me, apparently. I thought... His voice roughened. When we found those ruins empty except for old blood and signs of struggle, I thought I'd lost you. Thought I'd never get the chance to tell you. He broke off, jaw clenching. Winter waited, her heart hammering. Tell me what? She prompted softly. Atlas's eyes met hers, and the raw emotion in them stole her breath. That I love you. That I've been falling in love with you since the moment you laughed at me for being dramatic about mate bonds. That you're not just my mate, Winter. You're my choice, my partner, the one I want beside me through everything that comes. Tears spilled down Winter's cheeks. The mate bond flared bright and warm between them, but this was more than instinct or supernatural connection. This was real, human and honest and terrifying in its vulnerability. I love you too, Winter whispered, even when you're being a stubborn alpha king who thinks he has to carry everything alone. A surprised laugh burst from Atlas. Fair point. I'm going to keep those pups, Winter said, needing him to understand. I know it's complicated. I know it'll cause problems, but I can't just hand them over to someone else like they're... I know. Atlas lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. We'll figure it out. Together. The pack won't like it. The pack will adjust. His tone held that alpha authority again, and anyone who can't will have to deal with me. Winter smiled despite her exhaustion. My hero. Your mate, Atlas corrected. There's a difference. Heroes save the day and leave. Mates stay for the messy aftermath and help rebuild. I like the sound of that. Good. He settled back in the chair, but kept hold of her hand. Now sleep. You've been through hell, and you need to heal. Winter wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake and memorize this moment, but her body had other ideas. The warmth of the room, the softness of the bed, the security of Atlas's presence, all of it combined to pull her under like a gentle tide. She dreamed of 12 small heartbeats syncing with hers, of warm fur and cold stone, of choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. When she woke, late afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Atlas was still there, though he'd dozed off in the chair, his head tilted at an angle that would definitely give him a stiff neck. Winter took a moment to just look at him, this powerful alpha king who'd turned his entire pack upside down because she'd asked him to save some children. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation. Dr. Sarah poked her head in, smiling when she saw Winter awake. How are you feeling? Better. Winter's voice was stronger, less raspy. The pups? Recovering nicely. The injured one, Marcus he said his name is going to be fine. The cut was deep but clean, no infection. He'll have full mobility in a few weeks. Dr. Sarah's expression softened. They've been asking for you. Can I see them? I don't see why not if you're up for a short walk. The IV can come out now that you're hydrated. Atlas stirred at their voices, silver eyes going immediately alert. Winter? Everything okay? I want to check on the pups. He stood, stretching with a wince. Then let's go check on the pups. Doctor. Sarah removed the IV and helped Winter into a clean set of clothes, soft leggings, and an oversized sweater that smelled like Atlas. He offered his arm for support, and together they made their way back to the nursery. The transformation was remarkable. In just hours, the room had gone from makeshift emergency ward to actual nursery. Someone had brought in proper beds, toys, and books. The pups were clean, fed, and wearing new clothes. Some of the younger ones were playing with blocks under the supervision of pack members Winter didn't recognize. Others were curled up sleeping in the beds. Dante stood near the window again, his default position, apparently. But when he saw Winter, something in his rigid posture softened. "You came back," he said, as if he'd expected her to disappear. "I promised you were safe," Winter replied. "That means I keep checking on you, making sure you're okay." Little Marcus scrambled out of his bed, his bandaged legs slowing him only slightly, and launched himself at Winter's legs. She caught him with a surprised laugh, nearly overbalancing before Atlas steadied them both. "You're better," Marcus declared, hugging her knees fiercely. "They said you were sick from being cold with us. I'm sorry." Winter's heart cracked. She crouched carefully, bringing herself to his eye level. "Sweetheart, you have nothing to be sorry for. I chose to keep you warm. I wanted to, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." "Really?" His eyes were so wide, so hopeful it hurt. "Really?" Winter gathered him into a gentle hug, mindful of his injured leg. Over his head, she saw the other pups watching, wanting to believe they could trust this, afraid to hope. A little girl, maybe 7, with dark curls and her thumb in her mouth, tugged on Atlas's pant leg. He looked down at her, clearly uncertain how to handle a child. The girl pointed at Winter. "Is she really staying?" the girl whispered around her thumb. "Or will the bad men take her again?" Atlas knelt, his large frame somehow less intimidating when he lowered himself to the child's level. "She's staying, and nobody is taking anyone. You're all under Silverstone protection now. What's protection mean? It means we keep you safe, feed you, make sure nobody hurts you." Atlas glanced at Winter, something warm in his expression. "It means you have a home here for as long as you need it." The girl considered this gravely. Then she released her thumb long enough to ask, "Can we call her Mama?" The room went silent. Every adult froze. Winter's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Atlas, saw him watching her with careful attention, leaving the choice to her. 12 pups, orphaned by a war between packs. Children who'd lost everything and everyone. Who'd been abandoned in freezing ruins to die. Who Winter had found and chosen to save, no matter the cost. "You can call me whatever makes you feel safe," Winter said softly. The words came easier than she expected. "If that's Mama, then that's okay with me." The little girl's face lit up. "Mama," she tested, then launched herself at Winter with the full-body enthusiasm only children could manage. That broke whatever dam had been holding the others back. Suddenly, Winter was surrounded by small bodies, all vying for hugs and attention. Even the older ones crept closer, drawn by the promise of affection and safety. Dante was the last. He stood apart, arms crossed, fighting between the desire to be strong and the need to be comforted. Winter caught his eye and simply opened one arm in invitation. No pressure, no demand, just an offer. After a long moment, Dante crossed the distance and tucked himself against her side. His frame was still tense, but when Winter's arm came around his shoulders, he didn't pull away. "Thank you," he whispered, so quietly she almost missed it. "For staying, when you didn't have to." Winter pressed a kiss to the top of his head. "You don't thank family for staying. That's just what we do." Atlas moved to stand behind them, his presence solid and reassuring. When Winter looked up at him, she saw the same emotion reflected in his eyes. Love, pride, and maybe a little bit of wonder at how quickly their life had gotten complicated. Over the next few days, a routine emerged. Winter split her time between recovering from her ordeal and helping settle the pups into pack life. It wasn't easy. Some pack members remained hostile to the idea of housing enemy young. Whispers followed Winter through the hallways, about her being too soft, about Atlas losing his edge, about Silverstone looking weak. Atlas dealt with each complaint with firm authority, but the tension simmered beneath the surface. The pups themselves struggled to adjust. They flinched at loud noises. They hoarded food under their beds until Winter explained there would always be more. They had nightmares and woke screaming, reliving whatever horrors they'd experienced before ending up in those ruins. But slowly, surely, progress happened. Marcus's leg healed enough for him to run and play. The little girl, whose name was Iris, stopped sucking her thumb and started singing songs Winter taught her. Even Dante began to relax, his walls crumbling bit by bit as he realized they weren't going to be hurt or abandoned again. Winter threw herself into giving them stability. She set up schedules for meals and bedtime. She found books and games that made them laugh. She answered endless questions about pack life and helped them navigate their new reality. Atlas helped in ways that surprised her. He wasn't naturally comfortable with children, but he showed up. He enforced boundaries when the pups tested them. He told stories about pack history that captivated their attention. He even shifted to wolf form and let the younger ones climb on him like he was a living jungle gym. Watching him with them made Winter fall a little more in love every day. 2 weeks after the rescue, Winter was reading to a group of pups when heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. The pups tensed, their new sense of security still fragile. A massive man appeared in the doorway, easily as tall as Atlas, with broader shoulders and darker coloring. Power radiated from him in waves. An alpha. Winter stood instinctively, placing herself between the stranger and the children. The pups huddled behind her, Dante's hand finding hers and gripping tight. "You must be Winter." The man's voice was deep, gravelly. His eyes, an unusual amber color, swept over the scene with unreadable intensity. The human who thinks she can change centuries of pack law with one act of misguided compassion. I wasn't trying to change pack law. Winter kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. I was trying to keep children from freezing to death. Noble. His tone suggested he thought it was anything but. Also naive. These pups are Shadow Maw, my pack, and I've come to collect them. Behind Winter, Iris whimpered. Marcus pressed against her leg. Dante's grip turned painful. Silas. Atlas's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He appeared in the doorway, moving to stand beside Winter with predatory grace. I wasn't aware we had an appointment. Silas Blackthorn, Winter realized this must be the Shadow Maw Alpha, bared his teeth in something too aggressive to be called a smile. I don't need an appointment to collect my pack's young from enemy territory. They weren't in your territory, Atlas countered coldly. They were abandoned in neutral ruins, dying. When we found them, there wasn't a single Shadow Maw wolf within miles. A temporary retreat. A 3-day abandonment. Atlas's eyes flashed gold. You left children, Silas, orphans of your own pack, left them to die of exposure and starvation while you regrouped. Silas's jaw clenched. The situation was complicated. It always is. Winter heard herself speak before she could stop. Both alphas turned to look at her. War is complicated. Politics are complicated. But this shouldn't be. They're children. They needed help. That's all that matters. You're human. Silas said it like a curse. You don't understand pack dynamics. These pups need to be with their own kind. Their own kind abandoned them. Winter's voice shook with anger now. I found them huddled in a freezing crypt, terrified and injured. Where was their own kind then? Mama, don't let him take us. Iris clutched at Winter's sweater. Please. The single word, Mama, hit the room like a physical blow. Silas's eyes widened. Behind him, the Shadow Maw warriors who'd accompanied him shifted uneasily. They call you mother? Silas's tone was incredulous. They call me what makes them feel safe. Winter lifted her chin, which is more than your pack did for them. Winter. Atlas's hand touched her shoulder, a warning. But there was pride in the gesture too. Silas studied them for a long moment. The pups pressed against Winter's back. The room held its collective breath. These pups are Shadow Maw, Silas finally said. That makes them my responsibility. No. Dante's voice rang out, young but fierce. He stepped around